Good news, I suppose, if you want to look at it this way, for James Packer. He's got another interested buyer.
Peter, good morning. Yeah, it's always good to have an auction, isn't it? When you've got to accept the only bid that's available, you take whatever price you're offered. If there's two people at the table, that does change things a little bit. Oaktree, of course, famously a buyer of debt. They're offering to finance Crown's buyback of Packer's stake. Effective, that would reduce the number of shares on offer by that 37% holding that James Packer has. In theory, that would also free Crown up to regain or retain its casino licences in all of the states, including those where there's a Royal Commission currently removing James Packer from the considerations and letting the company effectively reapply or at least be considered without that influence. Remains to be seen, of course, whether that's a better deal, but it's certainly a different one. And with Blackstone's bid for the whole company also on the table, adds a little bit of competitive pressure to the conversation.
Well, okay, as an outsider, Scott, what do you think is the better deal between Oaktree and Blackstone?
It's a good question, isn't it? Look, I think either way, the biggest risk for Crown shareholders right now is if neither of these deals come off, and Packer is either stuck with his holdings or has to sell for a really cheap price, there is real risk on the downside for Crown's shares. They have a takeover premium in them one way or the other. I got to say, I think probably the Blackstone bid gives you a certain price. So if you're a long-suffering Crown shareholder, you just want to get out, get the price that's offered and go, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah,
if you do want the Oaktree deal, you are effectively saying, look, I think Crown as a listed company continues to go on, deliver market-beating gains, hopefully, if you're a shareholder. And if you believe that's likely and Blackstone would otherwise be getting it too cheap, you want the Oaktree deal. I think, on balance, I'd take the Blackstone bid.
So what do you think happened? I mean, remember when the Blackstone bid came in, the share price shot through the roof. It was up 20% for one day. Great news for those people who own that share. Do you think that'll level out now, or could there well be another rise or another drop?
Be fascinating to see you on it. Look, I think this is really challenging now for the board. The board's been really good. They've stayed silent, let the bid process play out, waited for another bidder to turn up. A bit of poker, they've played really, really nicely. That's a really good thing. The question remains, if the Oaktree deal is preferred or goes through, does the takeover premium disappear? I think it probably does to some degree, unless there is some sense that post-Packer, there's another potential deal or merger maybe with Star Entertainment on the table. You are going back to effectively that pre-bid price. And I think that's why if I was a shareholder, I'd want the Blackstone bid to go through. Or frankly, if I was a holder, I'd probably sell now into the market just because a bird in the hand is always worth two in the bush. And right now, that premium is in the share price.
Yep. Okay, Scott, moving on to Scott Morrison's speech last night. He's outlined a bit more of a path towards net zero emissions. There's going to be an agriculture carve-out, it seems, no new taxes as well. What's your take on that?
Fascinating. Look, I think the positive here for those who want action on climate change is he seems to be, didn't actually say the words, a path towards net zero was as close as we got. He mentioned 30 years, call that net zero 2050 for all intents and purposes. He's kind of flagging it without committing to it. That's positive if you're on that page. On the flip side, on the same page, if looking at the positives, good for business. Morrison saying, look, this is not going to be done at the expense of business. This is going to be a story of finding a way together. And so that's positive as well. The concern or the risk is a lot of the government's chips are still thrown in on these hopeful new technologies. Maybe at some point something comes up to help us get there. Maybe business finds a way to get there. That's not a bad idea, generally speaking. The market's pretty good at finding solutions. But I have to say, when you're putting a decent proportion of your goal on some hopeful new technology that may or may not eventuate, that's a big risk environmentally and, frankly, economically if they don't get there. So, good that it's not going to scare the horses. Some risk that if it's not enough, there may still have to be some sort of more, I won't say punitive, but some more strict requirements put in place in the future decades that get us there quickly and maybe even uncomfortably if technology and business doesn't get us there by themselves.